Hello and welcome back to the channel. So as all of you who have been following my channel recently know, I've been making challenge videos of various Bethesda games for a while, with the most prominent of these games being Skyrim. In one of my challenges, I utilized what is by far my favorite mod list, a list called LoreRim. In that video, I made sure to give the list a shout out, but I enjoy it so much that I decided I'd make a review video specifically about the list. So let's just get right into why I love the mod list and why I would highly recommend giving it a try if you have a system that can handle it, of course. Let's start with what is most pertinent for anyone considering downloading a large and demanding mod list like this, which mainly is what are the requirements needed to just run it in the first place. Here are Biggie Boss's recommendations for both versions of the mod list. Now remember, these are just recommendations rather than hard rules. I can personally tell you that I run the game on Ultra at 1080p with pretty much no issues other than occasional stuttering in certain areas like Whiterun or Solitude. And to be honest, my specs aren't quite on par with the recommendation. They're just a bit under. Specifically, my VRAM for my graphics card is just a bit lower. I only have 12 gigs. So all I would say is you can just use these as a very general guide, but for the most part, this is fairly accurate. I think this list is only going to get better, and at this point, I am able to run it pretty comfortably with my current setup. So Biggie and those who help with the list have managed to thoroughly optimize it, so much so that I genuinely don't notice stuttering since it is actually fairly rare. And I've pretty much eliminated the issue with the use of lossless scaling, which I cannot recommend this enough. I'll bring up an image and put it here. I highly recommend you use this if you have a sort of lower mid-tier system like mine. And if you want to know what it is, I'd recommend going and watching another video. It's kind of beyond the scope of this video, but just know that it's great. It costs money, but it's a one-time purchase and very, very much worth it. So as a result, I'm able to enjoy my playthroughs without worrying about frame drops or performance hits. Now, let's talk about some of the more specific changes made to the actual game in this mod list, and let's get into the review proper. So as you can see, the game looks incredible with massive improvements to meshes, textures, and environmental lighting. Each different biome area has been enhanced in a lore-friendly way. So for example, the Whiterun Tundra actually remains a tundra with some minor additions rather than becoming another massive forest like some other lists do, which if that's what you like, that's fine, but I actually like these areas to generally remain the same just with some upgrades. Also, areas with a lot of flora have been massively improved with even more variety, which is made possible by the inclusion of things like Happy Little Trees, Nature of the Wildlands, Folkvanger, and many more environmental mods that you can find in list form in the load order library link on the LoreRim Nexus page. Mountains, dungeons, houses, weapons, animals, and even basic utensils all receive texture upgrades that visually enhance the entire world. As a result, the entire game looks better from top to bottom. One of the reasons I appreciate this kind of all-encompassing visual overhaul is that Biggie has managed to make optimized adjustments that give you the most visual improvement while sacrificing as little performance as possible. So for someone like me, this is great because I simply do not have the time to devote to meticulously modding the game and patching it myself in order to achieve what would likely just be a worse result. As was mentioned earlier, lighting and shadows have also been massively improved with the use of E&B, as well as mods like Lux and enhanced volumetric lighting and shadows, or EVLAS. Light sources and shadows now feel way more realistic. So now as a result, say you go into a really dark cave, the lighting is even more piercing in the darkness and it just feels a lot more realistic. So overall, I'd say the graphical improvements to the world cannot be overstated. And LoreRim is definitely in the top tier of any mod list that makes the game look incredible and closer to more modern titles. Okay, let's talk about Requiem. Now, this is definitely one of those things that you will either love or hate about this mod list. I think it's important to talk about this first since the entire list is basically built around this gameplay overall. So I thought we should probably start with a few of the things that Biggie himself has said about it first.
Now, this is a Requiem list, as I mentioned. There we go. We'll start off the Requiem installation. So it does have a lot of early game difficulty, but you can definitely overcome that difficulty. One thing that you really got to learn about Requiem is skills are basically useless if you don't have a perk invested into them. Like if you don't have a perk into lockpicking, which is actually called Wayfarer in this, these are custom trees. you won't be able to lockpick anything. If you don't have a perk in pickpocket, you won't be able to pickpocket anything.
Okay, with that in mind, let's now go to the Nexus page and take a look. A consistent description of Requiem is that it's too encompassing to describe in a short paragraph, or really even in a short segment. With this in mind, I am also going to simply rely on a quick summary since this isn't a video specifically about Requiem. However, if people are interested in a video solely about Requiem with like statistics and data involved, let me know in the comment section of this video. But for now, let's just focus on the basics. So from what we've read and heard, Requiem has one main goal: to make Skyrim a better RPG. Now, in order to do so, first, Requiem has to make Skyrim internally more realistic and consistent by de-leveling the world and changing base stats, damage, armor ratings, etc. With these changes, the world becomes more internally realistic. So, for example, your level 1 character should not be able to easily kill the undead Nords by the hundreds in an ancient dragon cult crypt. By the internal logic of the world, that shouldn't be something that your novice who doesn't know anything can do. Now, obviously, if you want to invent headcanon, make your character powerful from the beginning, that would be, I guess, a separate issue. But in that case, I don't think that this list is for you. This is one of those lists it's not a power fantasy. You have to earn your position in the world. And if you enjoy that, that is ultimately the most appealing part of this overhaul. So this should instead be a fairly difficult prospect for a novice. As a result, it is incumbent upon the player character to tackle more manageable enemies first and other more manageable tasks first in order to gain the relevant experience before you try something more difficult like that. Or perhaps you can approach it somewhat differently. There are other avenues, so perhaps your character can tackle the problem from a different angle to get around their limitations. For example, you can find a way to build more wealth to hire mercenaries with the relevant skills to kill the Draugr for you if you'd prefer a different route to just pure combat or your character doing it all on their own. In general, the idea is to make the game more challenging in a more organic, lore-friendly way rather than simply giving enemies a bigger health bar and higher attack damage. The second thing that it does is Requiem brings back the importance of class distinctions and trade-offs. So one of the criticisms of Skyrim that I think is pretty valid is that it really had way too sharply departed from Oblivion to some degree, but more so Morrowind's more restrictive classes and class system. So there's not much in Skyrim forcing you to play a certain way. So for example, you can choose to play as a warrior class and pretty easily master magic while simultaneously becoming the greatest stealth archer rogue ever. Now, I understand some people enjoy this kind of freedom and the power fantasy style embraced in the game, and honestly, that's just fine if it's your preference. But a lot of fans of the series, myself included, really enjoyed the class systems that limited choices in Morrowind and to a lesser degree in Oblivion. Requiem attempts to address this change by returning to some of the more restrictive classes from these previous Elder Scrolls titles, as well as drawing inspiration from more traditional RPGs like Baldur's Gate and Gothic. As a result, a pure warrior build will have the trade-off of being terrible with magic, archery, speech, etc. if you don't build into those things initially. If that's all you want to do is be a warrior, you gotta level up those warrior skills because that's what you're going to be good at. Now, it doesn't mean that it's a hard line, like you can work harder to level up those other skills at, the cost of your warrior skills, but that doesn't make much sense if that's kind of the build you're going for. So I think what I like about this is it kind of forces you to be more focused on what you actually want and sort of funnels you in that direction, which is honestly the spirit of a role-playing game. You're playing a role. Now, this will most certainly change gameplay since the character simply won't be able to stealth archer their way out of a situation if the character doesn't know the first thing about sneaking or archery. Thus, they'll be forced to rely on what they know or find a suitable workaround within their wheelhouse of proficient skills. Now, if all of these things don't sound appealing to you, do not download this mod list. With that disclaimer out of the way, let's dive into some of the major overhauls, improvements, and new additions to gameplay in the actual list itself. Alright, so let's start with what is, in my opinion, one of the best aspects of this entire mod list, the combat overhaul. So LoreRim utilizes the attack MCO framework with precision and true directional movement to completely change third-person combat into something more modern and enjoyable. The inclusion of a stamina management system, dodging, and AI changes that make the enemies smarter and more strategic ultimately make nearly every combat scenario feel unique and challenging. Now, I do not play in first-person perspective, so I can't really review it, but what I will say is that from the gameplay I have seen, it looks great. So if you do enjoy first-person gameplay, just know that for this mod list, it also has been massively overhauled, but I can't say a whole lot about it because I pretty exclusively play in third person. Next up is the immersion of the mod list. So LoreRim overhauls many of the major systems in the game outside of combat that really enhance this particular aspect. So for example, cooking, alchemy, merchant gameplay, even drug use are improved for the sake of immersion. That much is evident if you've seen one of my challenge videos where it was LoreRim that I was playing and I was a Khajiit drug addict. It actually added a layer of immersion to skooma use that made it way more interesting and a lot more fun. Requiem and supplementary mods like, and I'm so sorry if I'm going to butcher this, but NI Scions mods add to or completely overhaul every aspect of the game. So from NPC overhauls to environmental sounds to perk balancing, everything is curated by the Modlist author to allow for more immersive gameplay. You want to play as a bounty hunter? Go ahead and utilize the missives in each city and collect the rewards. You want to play as a bard? Grab an instrument and head over to the Bard's College to learn the trade and maybe go around Skyrim making money. The different playstyles and builds made possible by the many overhauls and immersive changes really make the game feel fresh for each and every playthrough that you do, which is huge for me because it's what keeps Skyrim fresh in the first place. I've played vanilla countless times, so I like the change. I like the freshness. Now with all that being said, let's look at the next major area of change. Quests. LoreRim has a massive number of quest expansions as well as new additions. Major expansions of vanilla questlines, including the Companions, College of Winterhold, the Dark Brotherhood, and many more, make the most popular questlines more engaging and enjoyable. New quests have been added, including favorites like Worm's Tooth, the Forgotten City, and Vigilant. And these are only the tip of the iceberg. Honestly, in this mod list, I don't think I've even gotten through a quarter of the expansions or new additions. So you will certainly not run out of things to do in LoreRim anytime soon. The list also massively improves NPC AI for immersive interaction, dialogue, and, as we mentioned before, combat. There are also expansions for vanilla followers, as well as several brand new followers added to the list, including fan favorites like Inigo and Lucian. NPCs in this list feel a little more real and behave like reasonable people living in Skyrim. So for example, they don't rush a dragon when the city's under attack. They also have more sensible detection when the player is attempting to be a sneaky little rat. With the addition of even more NPCs, the world feels a bit more lived in and grounded as well. Overall, the NPC experience in LoreRim will definitely make you not want to go back to the kind of bland vanilla version of that. The list also adds a huge number of new animations for idling, walking, combat styles, and even picking up alchemy ingredients. These additions make the game feel more modern and just generally add a lot more variety to combat and movement and really even just everyday activities that you would be doing in the game. I really don't have much more to say or add about these other than what you can see with your own eyes from most of the clips. These animations probably do most of the heavy lifting when it comes to making this mod list feel as transformative as it does. And there really isn't a part of the gameplay where an animation isn't making a critical alteration to how the game looks and feels. Alright, so the city overhauls are also really impactful. All cities are now bigger and feel more lived in, more people roam the streets and have conversations. People don't acknowledge you by default like you're particularly special everywhere you go if you haven't done anything. Nevertheless, the cities retain their unique aesthetics and identities. For example, Whiterun now has paved streets and the Gildor Green looks incredible, but it's still Whiterun. Solitude looks magnificent with taller towers and more NPCs, giving it a more metropolitan feel, but still feels like Solitude. Riverwood, probably one of the more transformed areas that surely you've seen a million times in videos where people compare vanilla Skyrim with modded Skyrim. Riverwood still feels like a little backwater town in the woods, and Dragonbridge looks like a small village built around a military outpost. The bridge itself looks incredible. In the end, I understand that for some people, this will still feel like too much, but for me personally, I think that this list nails city overhauls. Now let's talk about what I think is the best part of the list. the overhauls to the perks. As was stated before, LoreRim is built around Requiem. LoreRim incorporates some of NI Scion's, mods to give the player more options for overcoming early game difficulties introduced by Requiem. The number of perks and balance changes added are immense and would simply be too overwhelming to go in depth on for this video, so I've decided to just mention them and then focus on a particular mod made specifically for this list that will illustrate how great this is. So Biggie's Traits is a mod created by Shazda for LoreRim specifically. If it seems familiar, you might recognize this from Fallout New Vegas. So the idea is that these traits have a benefit as well as a downside as a trade-off. So for example, if you choose the perk Bane of the Wicked for a Paladin playthrough or something, you will greatly benefit from this perk while you fight the undead, Daedra, and werewolves, so of course, a Paladin playthrough. However, while playing most of the other quests, combat may be more difficult because you're going to do less damage to everything else. You will certainly have to take this into account since the majority of your fights throughout the entirety of your playthrough will most likely fall under the second category. They may not, depending on how you play, but for the most part, if you want to do the main storyline, you're probably not going to be fighting that many undead. Well, other than the Draugr. Thus, the decision shouldn't be made lightly. This necessary consideration fits perfectly in line with the spirit of the list. I cannot express how great this small addition is for making Skyrim that much more of an RPG, which is the intention of Requiem in the first place, and more so, I believe, Biggie's intention with this list. Now, I've sprinkled my opinion throughout this video while talking about many of the additions, overhauls, and improvements LoreRim makes to Skyrim. However, in this section, I'm just going to lay out all of my favorite aspects of the list in no particular order. First of all, Requiem. It's simply a must for me at this point. I just cannot play Power Fantasy Skyrim anymore. I enjoy the initial challenge of building a character up while having to overcome difficulties and trade-offs of some of the perks I've picked. I enjoy the immersion of creating a character who has to grow and learn a particular skill before they can be proficient. I enjoy the danger of an open world and the feeling of being a little scared before entering a dungeon, not knowing what I'm about to encounter or what level they're going to be. I enjoy all of these things because overcoming challenges feels awesome. I also think that the difficulty is a bit exaggerated sometimes. A little bit of planning, strategy, and common sense makes this list feel really manageable to me. If you're someone who's been scared away from Requiem lists by people lamenting the difficulty, I think you should at least consider giving it a chance for yourself. You may actually end up enjoying it as long as you understand what it really requires to be successful. So realistically, you're going to have to put in the time and the work for it, but it's not that bad, I promise. Second, combat. I love the modernized combat and how strategic it feels. Even just fighting bandits can turn into a kind of chess match, especially early on before you've gotten all your perks maxed and you still have to worry a lot about stamina management. But that breakthrough point in a fight when you gain the upper hand after a lot of trouble makes it so worth it. Third, immersion. I know it's a word that gets thrown around a lot and perhaps a bit carelessly, but I truly feel like this list is one of the most immersive experiences because of the fact that it builds around Requiem while also balancing the initial difficulty with character build options aplenty. I've seen some of the coolest builds on the Modding Bungalow Discord, which is the Discord for this mod list. If you're interested, I'll put a link to it in the description as well. There are so many ways to play the game, and even if there were no other overhauls outside of Requiem and the perk overhauls, it would still be an incredible list with more variety than most. Lastly, I think the most obvious improvement, and probably the least important for me personally, is the graphical improvement. Graphics aren't absolutely necessary to me. If I felt like I couldn't reasonably run the ultra profile, I would most certainly downgrade. Nevertheless, I can certainly appreciate the improvements compared to vanilla Skyrim. It is night and day. After playing through it a countless number of times, the update is genuinely refreshing, and for no other reason than that it simply makes it feel different and yet still familiar for someone who's played it thousands of times. As I've said before, the visual improvements and additions aren't over the top and they don't feel out of place. Skyrim still feels like Skyrim in this mod list. It just looks so much better. And that just about sums it up. I genuinely love Skyrim, and with the introduction of mod lists, I feel like we're living in some of the best times to be a Bethesda gamer. With all that being said, feel free to let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section down below. I would also appreciate a like, and if you're feeling extra generous, you could also subscribe to the channel for more content like this. But even if you don't, just your viewership is appreciated. So in any case, I hope that this video was at least somewhat informative, and hopefully, I'll catch you in the next one.